Do something for me. If you ever find yourself in Kyoto and walk into any of these 5 Buddhist temples, Genko-an, Yogen-in, Shoden-ji, Hosen-in, or Myoshinji, look up. You'll see dark stains. Look closely enough and you'll make out shapes, handprints, footprints, the outline of a human body pressed into the wood. When you figure out what you're looking at, you don't forget it. Those stains are over 400 years old. The year is 1600, and Japan is about to explode. Toyotomi Hideyoshi had just died, and every powerful group in the country was eyeing each other like the last slice of pizza was on the table. On one side was Tokugawa Ieyasu. On the other, his rival Ishida Mitsunari. Both were heading toward a showdown at Sekigahara, and Ieyasu needed someone to hold Fushimi Castle near Kyoto and buy him enough time to get there. He turned to his oldest friend, Torii Mototada, gave him about 1,800 men. Then Ieyasu packed up and left. Just walked out. Good luck, buddy. See you never. Now here's what makes Mototada worth knowing about. He knew exactly what this was. A human speed bump. Ieyasu needed him to buy time by getting killed. And Mototada was fine with it. He wrote Ieyasu a final letter before the enemy arrived. He had no complaints, understood this was a sacrifice and not a rescue, and his only request was that Ieyasu use the time well. He sealed it and got back to work. In August 1600, Ishida Mitsunari showed up outside Fushimi Castle with 40,000 soldiers. Mototada had 1,800. His answer was no. For 11 days, those 1,800 men held the castle, fighting through burning corridors, falling back through crumbling rooms, giving up ground inch by inch. When the walls finally broke and only a few hundred warriors remained, Torii Mototada and every last man committed seppuku, the samurai ritual of dying with honor rather than surrender, on the floorboards of the castle. Their blood soaked into the wood. 10 weeks later, Tokugawa Ieyasu won the Battle of Sekigahara. He used every day Mototada bought him. The dynasty he built held power for 265 years. In 1623, when Fushimi Castle was torn down, workers pulled up those blood-soaked floorboards and brought them to 5 Buddhist temples in Kyoto. They were installed as ceilings, so every person who walked through would walk beneath the men who died there. You can still go see them today. The stains are still there. Handprints, footprints, the outline of Mototada himself, still pressed into wood after 4 centuries. Mototada bought 265 years of peace with 11 days and 1,800 men. The blood ceilings are just the receipt. The year is 1189, and Minamoto no Yoshitsune, a commander of the Minamoto clan of Japan, was on the run from his own brother. He had spent years winning battles on that brother's behalf, handing Minamoto no Yoritomo an entire country. Then Yoritomo looked at the man who made all of it possible and decided he was a threat. "You win all my wars for me? Bold of you! Get out!" Yoshitsune fled north across Japan, hunted by his own brother's soldiers, until he was finally cornered at a walled estate called Koromogawa no Tachi in northern Honshu. No allies, no escape route, nowhere left to go. And right there, at his side, like always, was Benkei. Now, Musashibo Benkei was not a normal person. He was a warrior monk, enormous, terrifying, and completely loyal to Yoshitsune. The story goes that Benkei had fought 999 duels and won every single one. He fought one more, lost, and decided the only logical response was to spend the rest of his life serving the man who beat him. Most people lose a fight and sulk for a week. Benkei swore lifelong loyalty. Different kind of guy. When Yoritomo's soldiers closed in on the estate, Benkei looked at the bridge in front of the building and made a decision. He walked out there and stood on it. Alone. No backup. No plan to win. His entire job was to hold that bridge long enough for Yoshitsune to die with honor on his own terms inside. That's it. That was the whole assignment. Wave after wave of soldiers came at him. He cut them down. More came. He cut those down too. Arrows started coming. He kept fighting. More arrows. Still fighting. At some point, the soldiers literally started hesitating because they could not figure out why this man was still standing. He wasn't behind cover. He wasn't retreating an inch. He was just there at that bridge, taking everything they threw at him and refusing to go down. When the assault finally stalled and the men crept forward to finish him, they found the truth. Benkei was already dead. He had died on his feet, riddled with arrows, still standing at that bridge. He hadn't fallen simply because he would not let himself fall until the job was done. Inside, Yoshitsune had performed seppuku. Japan built plays around this story. Artists painted it for centuries. Kids still learn it in school. A man stood alone on a bridge and held it not to save himself, but to give someone else a few more minutes of honor. 800 years later, people still talk about it. That's the whole job. Here is a man who sat across from his boss, laid out a clear plan to avoid a pointless death, got completely ignored, and went off and died anyway with a smile on his face. Whether that makes him the most honorable human being who ever lived, or just the most stubborn, is honestly up for debate. Japan put his statue in front of the Imperial Palace in Tokyo, so they have an opinion. In 1336, Japan was falling apart. Emperor Go-Daigo was losing his grip on the country to a rival warlord named Ashikaga Takauji, who was marching on the capital with a massive army and the kind of confidence that comes from having a massive army. The emperor's best general, the man he was counting on to fix all of this, was Kusunoki Masashige. And Masashige looked at the numbers and saw exactly how this was going to go. The emperor ordered him to march to the coast near modern-day Kobe and meet the Ashikaga army head-on at Minatogawa. Masashige laid it all out for his lord. The enemy is too big. A direct fight doesn't work. Let me pull back, lure them inland, cut their supply lines, and hit them somewhere I have an advantage. Good plan. Probably the right plan. The emperor listened carefully and then went with his other advisors instead. Cool. Thanks for the input, Masashige. Now please go die. Masashige accepted without argument. Then he went home to say goodbye to his son. He asked the boy what he wished for. His son said he wanted his father to come back. Masashige told him to grow up to be a loyal warrior no matter what. Then he stood up, walked out the front door, and never came back. On July 4, 1336, Masashige's 700 soldiers were ground down by an army many times their size at Minatogawa. He fought until almost no one around him was left standing. When it was over, he and his surviving brother Masasu committed seppuku together on the battlefield. His last recorded words were, "I would that I had 7 lives to give for my emperor." 7 lives. Not one, which he had just spent on a battle he personally told the emperor was unwinnable. 7. The man was still figuring out how much more he owed on the way out the door. That's either the most amazing thing a human being has ever said, or it should concern you. Possibly both. He lost the battle, lost his life. The emperor he died for lost the war anyway. History decided none of that mattered. The point wasn't the outcome. The point was the kid he said goodbye to and his statue still standing in Tokyo because a country decided that kind of loyalty was worth remembering forever. Nogi Maresuke was a young officer in the same 1877 Satsuma Rebellion, fighting on the opposite side from Saigō. During the chaos, his unit's battle flag got snagged by the enemy. In samurai culture, that was about as bad as it gets. Not just embarrassing, it meant you failed your duty at the most basic level. So Nogi did what any totally reasonable samurai would do. He walked straight up to Emperor Meiji and asked for permission to die. The emperor said no. You're fine. Go home. So Nogi lived with it for 35 years. He went on to become one of Japan's best generals. He led forces in the First Sino-Japanese War in 1894 and 1895. He commanded the siege of Port Arthur in the Russo-Japanese War of 1904 and 1905, a brutal 10-month fight that cost Japan over 57,000 men. Both of his sons died in that war. He watched them buried and kept going because the emperor still needed him. Then on July 30th, 1912, Emperor Meiji died. On September 13th, 1912, the day of the emperor's funeral, General Nogi and his wife Shizuko committed junshi, the old samurai practice of dying to follow your lord in death. He was 62 years old. He left behind a death poem. He had carried the shame of that lost flag for 35 years, raised his sons, buried his sons, fought 2 wars, and waited every day for the moment he finally had permission to go. Japan was stunned. The country had moved on. Junshi had been illegal for over 200 years, but Nogi did it anyway because he decided the right time to leave was when the world he belonged to finally ended. His house in Tokyo is now a public museum. Every year on the day he died, people still leave flowers. By 1877, the samurai were finished and everybody knew it. The Meiji Restoration had dragged Japan into the modern world fast, and part of that meant tearing down the old way completely. Samurai couldn't carry swords in public. Their government pay was cut off. Their whole way of life was wiped out. Imagine spending your whole life training to be a warrior, and then one afternoon the government sends you a letter that says, "Yeah, we've decided that thing you are doesn't exist anymore. Good luck out there." Saigō Takamori had been one of the most powerful men in the early Meiji government, a war hero who helped build the new Japan. He resigned in 1873 after a power dispute and went home to Satsuma, where he opened schools for young samurai who had nowhere left to go. The government decided those schools looked too much like a private army and moved in to seize weapons. Saigō's students rose up in rebellion. Saigō was 49 years old. He had a way out. He stood with his students instead. For months in 1877, the Satsuma rebels fought the Imperial Army across Kyushu. The Imperial Army had modern rifles, artillery, and tens of thousands of drafted soldiers. The samurai had swords, discipline, and the kind of stubborn pride that gets you a statue after you lose. It was not enough. They bled out with every fight until September left Saigō on a steep hill called Shiroyama outside Kagoshima with about 500 men. On land, 30,000 imperial troops had them surrounded. 500 against 30,000. And just in case the math wasn't already depressing enough, there were also boats. On September 24, 1877, before dawn, the imperial forces launched their final assault. Saigō took his 500 men and charged directly down the hill into the surrounding army. Not away from it, into it. He was shot on the way down. By some accounts, he died by seppuku on the slope. By others, a follower beheaded him to preserve his honor. The details are debated. What isn't is that the last real samurai fight in Japanese history ended on that hillside before the sun came up. The whole era was over before breakfast. The government called him a rebel and a traitor. Emperor Meiji issued a pardon a few years later. Saigō was buried in Kagoshima, where a statue still stands. Japan mourned him ever since as the symbol of something it chose to leave behind, and it was never totally sure it should have. The 2003 film The Last Samurai is loosely based on his life. His version had a lot more blood and a lot fewer Tom Cruise moments. Well, that's all I got. Every single one of these men had a clean way out, and not one of them took it. Whether that makes them legends or just really, really bad at knowing when to quit is honestly your call. Either way, hit that subscribe button and go watch these videos next. I'll see you over there.